What's the weirdest thing you've been falsely accused of? Story 1. A long time ago, in exchange for housing, I took care of my best friend's 2-year-old niece and 3-year-old nephew. One day, their insane mom showed up and insisted that I'd given her children pot brownies, not regular brownies, since they were running all over the place like children sometimes do. She even called the cops on me, who confirmed that I gave the kids normal drug-free brownies. She was admitted not long after. It was so dramatic. Story 2. Doing cocaine every morning before work. It's called coffee, people. I work at the same low-paying company as you all. None of us could afford that coke habit. Story 3. Freshman year of college, I had a super sheltered roommate. One Friday, I illegally bought a bottle of vodka, had a shot, thought it was gross, and put it in the freezer. Never drank again the rest of the semester. She accused me of being an alcoholic a month later. She was ungodly stupid. If I were an alcoholic, that bottle of vodka wouldn't have stayed there the entire semester. Practically full. Story 4. My mom forced me go to her friend's house when I was about 10, and her daughter accused me of taking off a day on one of those mini page-a-day calendar things. Eventually we had to call our moms to look up what date it was, and she just thought it was the 10th even though it was the 11th. Then she accused me again and said that yesterday's page hadn't been removed yet, and I removed it to display today's date. I was so confused. Story 5. Well, I was accused of being a drug dealer when I was in middle school. They even suspended me for 2 weeks, but I figured it was more of a vacation than a punishment. Story 6. Some places in the US have big white letters on the side of the hill to signify the name of the town, the name of local schools, etc. I grew up in between two towns like this. Both of the hill letter towns were crosstown rivals and were always playing lame pranks on each other. One time, a bunch of kids from my school went up to the rival's letter and changed it around to their letter. It required hiking up a large hill and rearranging boulders for hours. A couple of the kids were football players and there were about 6 kids doing the work. Because my car was seen in town, I was accused of doing it, just me. I wouldn't have even climbed up the hill, let alone spent 8 hours lifting rocks. There are still people that remember it happening and ask if it was me. Story 7. I have to ask every customer if they'd like to join our rewards program. It's the retail equivalent of would you like fries with that. To complete the enrollment I need a phone number and an email address. Being accused of trying to steal someone's identity to sell it to the Russians or some equally paranoid rant is a dramatic event that happens a handful of times per year. One lady went on a 15-minute rampage about how she doesn't trust anyone with her phone number because banking can be done over the phone and she never knows when she'll be tapped, etc. Then she has the nerve to go off on me because she's not getting any reward coupons. Once in a while I'll drop the hint that they can, in fact, give me a fake number or email and I'll never know, and they look at me dumbfounded like someone just told them Santa Claus isn't real. Story 8. I got accused of a teammate's wife by the wife herself. It wasn't really an accusation. She told one of the girlfriends that she and I had, then that chick told everyone else and it got back to me. We didn't, not even close. To this day I have no idea why she would say that. Story 9. Oh God, somewhat long story but I'll give you a shorter version of how I was almost arrested for shooting fish near the Washington Monument, D.C. Canadian here, and I was on a class trip to D.C. during high school about 16 years old. A fellow student and myself were on a small body of water near the monument on paddle boats you move by pedaling. I see a styrofoam cup in the water and decide to snag the garbage out of the water. Couldn't quite reach it so took off my sunglasses and fished it out. At the same time someone was shooting off mini fireworks caps of some kind near the shore. Some bright lady saw me pointing a gun shades at the water and heard me shooting fish. Cops swarm me and my whole class bus as I return to shore. Cops confiscate blade I had on me, and I along with other students who were sent home for partying it up in the hotel, had to leave the States that day on a bus home to settle the situation. TLDR fished something out of the water with dark sunglasses while firecrackers going off nearby. Someone heard that saw me from a distance and thought I was shooting fish. Story 10. Using all the toilet paper and then wiping my on the wall. My maternal grandmother was a who then made me sleep in the bathtub. It was my brother who did it, but he was the golden child so I got the blame. Story 11. Staying at my girlfriend's hometown in rural China. Little old lady fell upstairs. She started accusing me of pushing her. I was a good 10 m away. A security guard saw what happened. He told me to just ignore her and walk away. Story 12. I had my bedroom door closed and was listening to music. Suddenly my dad yanks the door open and is pissed. Like screaming at me, right? And my dad isn't an aggressive dude. Nor was I a rebellious child, maybe 13 at the time. Anyway, he pulls me out of my room into the hallway. It was an open hallway at the top of a flight of stairs. We'd been redoing it so there's drywall all over. He pulls me toward the top of the steps and there's a note scrawled into the drywall with a screwdriver. It said I hate SISTRSNAME, my name So he's like, what the is this? Why did you scratch this in? What did she do to you, etc, etc. And I'm like, Dad, why would I sign this? Well, many endless minutes later he realized this isn't a thing I would do. It would be stupid to sign it, especially right outside my door. See, sister was the one who reported it. So obviously she gets in trouble and am confused about why in the first place. Honestly, I still have no idea and am not even joking. I think she wanted to be Megan from Drake and Josh. Story 13. I once had a neighbor who accused me of wearing wigs in the public to confuse her and that I was conspiring with the local dentist. She had clearly mental issues. Story 14. My got pulled over by the police in his super tiny Impala car, because apparently some shop owner accused him of trying to steal a whole dumpster with said vehicle. Story 15. Being high at like 14 years old. I got grounded for 2 weeks. I was not high at all, never been high or drunk, my pupils were big because it was nighttime, my parent was just in and wanted someone to punish. Story 16. You know how there's that kid that's like, no, I've totally got a girlfriend, you haven't met her because she lives in another town. Well, that was me according to my friends, and then they met her. For some reason I've got a lot of stories like this that really happened to me, but no one ever believes me. Being late for work and later skipping out on work by not being in uniform. This was at a grocery store. Started with a foreigner employee yelling at me as I entered the store in broken English. I understood about 13 of what she was saying and tried explaining in vain that I didn't work there. Later when I was doing my shopping she came back and started yelling at me again and started trying to pull me towards the employee area. Luckily I was bigger and stronger, so I stood my ground and yelled for help. Another employee who spoke better English and could communicate with her arrived, and I yelled at him about his crazy coworker. The store owner was called in and gave me a gift card for my troubles and a lot of harsh words for the female employee. I saw the new employee I was presumably mistaken for a few weeks later. I have to admit, we were very similar except for our height, weight, skin tone, hair color, facial hair and race. Anyone could have gotten us mixed up. Story 17. Another student in elementary school once accused me of terrorism by blinding her with a so-called weapon I snuck into school. It was a little light for a diary that would reveal UV ink. I forgot it was in my pocket and took it to school accidentally. I pulled it out because the light was on and this girl across hall starts flailing and saying that I blinded her. I lost recess for a week even though it was just a light. They called it directed aggression or something. Story 18. The neighborhood insane lady accused me and my roommate of rape. My roommate caught his girlfriend cheating on him and threw her out. It was night and it was probably a little bit of a scene, not that big really. Insane lady yelled at me a day or two later when I was getting home from work and told me that she knew we had raped that girl and that she called the cops. I bet the cops know her really well. Story 19. This probably isn't as weird as other false accusations on here, but an older cousin of mine accused me of pickpocketing her and stealing $1K while at a birthday party, called the cops and everything on me. WTF. Still one of the most bizarre moments I've ever experienced in my life. I was 12 years old. Story 20. My previous roommate told me that I was part of the Illuminati's plan, who also are working with the mafia to harass him and keep him down. It was because, as he explained, that he was such a powerful religious force in the universe, and by keeping him in his place the Illuminati kept him from saving so many people. This in turn tricked God into not using him to save other people. He also hated women, non-whites, and heard fell things that were not there. TLDR, I am Illuminati and or mafia to keep down a roommate who I found on Craigslist. Be careful, friends, these people are actually out there. Story 21. One time some lady at the dollar store accused me of being Maleficent. Was minding my own business shopping. She came around a corner, stopped short, pointed at me on sight and said, "You are Maleficent." I was like, okay, the Disney character, and she sort of cornered me and continued yelling things like how I'm evil, and to stay away from her daughter. She was alone. Tried to remind her we'd never met, but she was very insistent about the Maleficent thing. This was loud enough to attract the attention of a few other people, and I was worrying it looked like I was getting called out for some actual dastardly deeds instead of being randomly confronted by a mentally ill stranger. Thankfully it de-escalated and I left the establishment at a pace carefully calculated to not look guilty. TLDR, can't go back to that Dollar Tree because they might think I'm a Disney villain. Story 22. I guess the weirdest thing I've been falsely accused of was naming my late pet hamster after this girl. Context: in the first grade I had this hamster that I've named Bailey. I loved Bailey, he was my first pet. Bailey was also just a random name I came up with on the spot in the pet store. Years later in 4th grade, I know it was at least in the intermediate classes, I met this girl whose last name was the same as my hamster's, Bailey. So in my awful attempts to socialize and become friends with this girl, I told her, "OMG cool, your last name is Bailey. I had a hamster named Bailey." Instantly she got this weirded out expression. At that moment I knew I then learned that human Bailey and these other girls who were supposed to be my friends went out of their way to tell everyone that I'm this weirdo stalker girl that followed human Bailey around. Went out to buy this hamster implying that I bought it afterward, and named it after human Bailey, whom I just met. Of course this lie was impossible because I had the hamster when I was in the 1st grade and I couldn't possibly know that this girl existed, seeing as she was from a totally different island, and I've never met or heard of her before that point. To this day I still have no clue as to why they would spread such a lie. TBH. My life is filled with odd lies and rumors spread about me. Being a socially awkward youth is something to say the least. Story 23. Once volunteered with a group to help clean out the house of an old lady who was a bit of a hoarder due to physical and mental problems. It was disgusting. We threw out a dozen hefty bags full of food wrappers, medical waste, etc. She stood there and yelled as we took each one out to the dumpster, insisting we were really carrying them to our cars so we could sell her valuable belongings. Story 24. I went bowling with my mom's side of the family. It was my turn to bowl, but there was a little girl who was maybe 5 next to me. I was always taught not to throw the ball the same time the person next to you is kinda like waiting your turn. Next thing I know, the dad of the little girl stands up and starts screaming and getting in my face, calling me a pedophile. Me being a 16-year-old kid literally having no clue what's going on and feeling awkward as I just started laughing as my cousins diffused the situation. Long story short, my uncle owned the bowling alley and quickly escorted the people out, so now it's a joke that gets tossed around occasionally. Story 25. I was once accused of not being an Australian, an accusation that was somehow started by the fact that I was eating a Vegemite and cheese sandwich and was wrapped up in a Port Adelaide scarf. I was told to knock it off, you're trying too hard. The guy refused to explain his lack of logic to me and he's never mentioned it since. I live overseas, so maybe he thought I was pretending to be Australian to be exotic. He really did think this though, because he tried to start several rumors that I wasn't Australian and actually British. What? I didn't and still don't understand. Why would I fake being from Australia? And if I was faking, why would I choose to have a weird bogan Adelaide accent instead of a Melbourneian one? Surely I'd want my fake family to originate from somewhere a tad classier than Elizabeth. Also, the footy scarf was my only scarf at the time, and I mean there were other people nearby wearing soccer and handball scarves, so I wasn't the odd one out. Story 26. I had just moved to New York for a job at a mid-size company. One of my coworkers threw a house party to welcome me and another woman who also just started. I didn't really know this other woman. She worked in a different department and we only talked once during a benefits orientation thing. It was a Friday night, and I stayed and partied into the next morning, while the other woman left around 10:30 p.m. or so. Next Monday morning at work, that woman messages me and says she needs to talk to me immediately. We go to the empty break room downstairs and she is furious. She's doing the red face angry crying thing. I heard you were talking about me after I left. You were telling everyone that there is no way I can make it in New York. How dare you talk about me behind my back? I hate drama and I will not let you get me involved in it. I don't think I'm explaining this well enough. She had veins popping out of her neck. She looked like she wanted to fight me. I'm absolutely shocked and confused and I'm looking around the room like that John Travolta gif. Are you sure it was me? I have no opinion on your ability to live in New York. I hardly even know your name, to be honest. That pissed her off more. She cusses at me a bit more and threatens to report me to HR if I don't stop talking about her behind her back. The situation kinda worked itself out because it turned out she couldn't in fact make it in New York and quit about a week and a half later. I ended up being good friends with the people who were at the original house party and I asked them about that night. If anyone was talking about her after she left, they all swear that her name was never mentioned and she just made the whole thing up. Friggin' crazy. My stepdad accused me of stealing a whole fancy metal clipboard, the kind that has a compartment on the inside so you can store stuff in it because it had a sticker on it from a band I liked. And I also liked stickers, so naturally I stole the whole thing. He searched my room and everything. I don't know if he found his precious clipboard or not. Story 27. When I was 13, my friend's sister got in an argument with an old lady in McDonald's after she said we all belong in a zoo. My friend's 9-year-old brother had climbed over the booth to get to his seat. The cops were called. They then accused me of being a local gangbanger with the moniker Lil Joker. I was not even in my city. They then searched our car and came out with a small Phillips head screwdriver like the ones for glasses and asked us, "What is this?" We told them it was a screwdriver. "It's a shank," was their response. All in all, a pretty hilarious interaction with the police when I was a kid. Story 28. Stealing all of my neighbor's booze while they were away for 5 days, then later getting beat up by him and his friend because of it, his friend being the one who actually stole it while they demanded I reimburse him for it. The story: I was asked to tend to their pets as they had to go to the next town over, and so I did. Thought nothing of it until him and a friend of him showed up at my door asking about the missing alcohol. I was like, wah, got a beating while still denying knowing anything about it. Fast forward a couple of days, my neighbor shows up at my door again. I'm about to flip him the off while reaching for my bat, which I now keep by the door. Just as I felt my fingers grabbing the bat, he said sorry and handed me a bottle of fine scotch. Again I'm like, wah. Turns out the dude that were with him when they was at my door knew they were going to leave for a couple of days. The day before they left he came for a visit, then while pretending to go to the bathroom went to the guest bedroom in the back of their house and left the window open. And that's the story of how I got beat up for stealing by the dude who actually stole it. Edit alias: me and my neighbor are at very good terms now and I always check their windows if they ask me to watch their pets. As for his now ex-friend, he's in jail for taking up loans in his now ex-GFS name using her ID and more. Story 29. Probably a bit more serious, less funny than most comments here. I get frequently called a woman in online discussions. Share, but that's not it. It's that, when I point out that I am, in fact, male, some people really freak out or try to shame me in some way for trying to delude them by pretending to be a guy. It's mostly in discussions about gender, etc., and I just don't get it. Not only the assumption that I, as a guy, couldn't possibly see the problem in it or belief that these things exist, the very fact they think ID apparently need to pretend to be a guy to be taken more seriously is exactly that they argue doesn't exist. Story 30. I was accused of setting the school on fire and causing a mini explosion that burnt off the rector's eyebrows. All the while I was in detention outside of his office. I've regularly been accused of only sleeping 3 hours a night, and of having wildly different sized testicles. Edit: missed an F. Story 31. Shitting outside of the toilet. I don't even daily, more like every third day. It couldn't have been the handicapped guy who was high as a kite. Nope, it was obviously Eujoxerus, who is both sober and constipated. Story 32. My first stepmom was convinced I was sneaking drinks of water out of the toilet bowl. She would sit in the bathroom with me to make sure I was really using the bathroom and not just using it as an excuse to get a drink from the toilet. My second stepmom accused me multiple times of flushing my stepbrother's possessions down the toilet. I guess I have the look of guy into toilets or something. Story 33. I was in a classroom making up a test I had missed. With one other student, the professor put us on opposite ends of the room and we began writing. About an hour and my professor looks up from her desk and yells at me to stop cheating off the other student's paper, or he'll get a 0. Not sure how I could see that far away, but okay. I asked her what she was talking about, and she looked angrily at me and said, "You know exactly what I'm talking about." I exchanged a confused look with the student across the room and continued my test. Story 34. Having an abortion. I was in college, home for a school break, mom and I watching TV, and out of nowhere, she yelled at me, "You had an abortion, didn't you?" "No." "Well, if you had, would you tell me?" "I mean, probably not." "See, I knew you had an abortion." I roll. Story 35. This one is a little more serious. When I was in the 7th grade, I was called to the principal's office and was greeted by police and a classmate. They were accusing me of beating this boy's back and buttocks to a pulp. He had been paddled viciously. They actually had him drop true and ask me why I did that. As it turns out, he was being beaten by his father and did not want to rat on his dad, so he picked me at random to blame. I was terrified. I thought I was going to jail. It did not take long for the cops to see that I was not capable of doing that. Poor kid, I think about him a lot. Hope he is doing okay 40 years later. Story 36. Trying to watch on YouTube on the tablet of my uncle while I stayed there for vacation. Turns out my 10-year-old cousin tried to look for it with his best friend. Story 37. Not me. My ex and I were at a concert 6 years ago when all of a sudden 2 cops showed up and said, "You have to come with us, sir." They dragged him out with me following, panicked, and once he was in cuffs etc. They finally told us a woman accused you of groping her in line for the women's bathroom. At this point, I'm thinking I haven't left his side yet, plus what would I do if he did grop her? The accusing woman suddenly runs up yelling, "Not him, let him go." She identified a man in a red hat and black shirt. My boyfriend was wearing a red hat and green shirt, but bought a black concert shirt and had it draped over his shoulders. The guy who groped her was sitting 2 seats down from my boyfriend. In middle school, my choir teacher always hated me because my socializing tainted his precious band of musically inept 13-year-olds who didn't give about his class. He once found a book in the trash and automatically assumed it was me. I had no history of vandalism or destruction of property. He sent me to the principal's office and they called him my dad, who quickly found out he had no evidence and set the guy straight in an awkward parent-teacher conference. That was the end of that. I really didn't throw the book away. Still wonder who did. Story 38. Some weird popular girl in my high school told everyone my 13-year-old brother stole the rims off of her car. Okay, Janet, that slightly chubby middle schooler isn't stealing, let alone some heavy rims, you weirdo. Story 39. I used to be friends with this girl when I was younger. Her mom was absolutely crazy. I think she just had a lot of mental issues. Looking back, one day I was at their house playing and they had just gotten a new puppy. The puppy jumped up and scratched me pretty hard right below where my left breast would be if I had been old enough to even have breasts. I was probably about 9. I went into their bathroom and lifted my shirt to see if I was bleeding, and my friend's younger sister just came in without knocking. I immediately pulled my shirt back down and she said sorry and left the bathroom. And that was it. I went back to playing and went home. A couple days later the police came to our house and said that the mom told them I flashed the younger girl on purpose. They told us that wasn't the first time that lady had called the cops and accused someone of something. They just said to steer clear. So I wasn't allowed on their street. I wasn't allowed to talk to my friend anymore. A lot of other went down too. That initial story of me flashing the younger sister turned into me doing a strip dance. One time I made the mistake of talking to her son. All I said to him was, "Can you read?" 2 hours later the police were at our door saying that her son told her I said, "You am gonna kill your whole family." I was 11 at that time. Sorry so long. A bunch of other went down. I still to this day have no idea why any of that happened. Story 40. I was accused by my parents of hiding wine cooler bottles and shot glasses under my bed that fell over and stained the carpet. A few problems. 1. I had been of age for 2 years at that point, so why would I need to hide empties from my parents? 2. I don't drink wine coolers, especially out of shot glasses. 3. I had literally just gotten back from living in a different country across an ocean for 6 months. Oh yeah, Mom, it definitely wasn't my 15-year-old brother whose room is directly across from mine. No way. Story 41. Riding my wife's horse secretly when I say I am busy at work, then acting like I can't ride with her when she asks me to. It all stemmed from me having sand on my pants because I was with a client on Ocean Boulevard, and apparently got sand on me, sand that looks like the sand in the horse's arena ring. She saw me ride it once and as I squeeze with my legs, which makes them run straight towards the fence around the arena, then freak out and try to throw me. I would never try and ride that beast alone. American warmbloods are big and frankly scary to non-riders. Story 42. I'd just come back from a client site and got a phone call from one of their senior supervisors. He accused me of stealing their mail because it was signed for by common Hispanic name. I took a moment to compose myself and said my last name is other common Hispanic name. The supervisor harumphed and said, "Name, other name, what's the difference?" Probably the most blatant racism I experienced working at that company, and the only time I've been accused of stealing mail. Story 43. Being a gangbanger at my old job. What actually happened was a coworker that didn't like me found a box cutter in the staff bathroom. This coworker took it to our department head and said it was definitely mine, and she knew that because I was a gang member. Spoiler alert, it wasn't my box cutter, it was the maintenance guy's. Story 44. I got accused on another Reddit thread of not being from NZ, because I said it was late where I was and I was going to bed, and apparently the troll I was playing with checked the time in NZ and said it was only 6 p.m. when I said it, so obviously I was lying. It was quite bizarre. Story 45. About 20 years ago, I was an adult advisor for a Demolay chapter. Demolay is a Masonic youth group for young men ages 13 to 21, similar to Rainbow for girls and the Order of Job's Daughters for young women. Each year, our jurisdiction held a statewide gathering known as Conclave. State-level officers for our group were elected. Members were able to meet up with friends from other areas of the state. Competitions were held, etc. This particular year was my first as an advisor. Prior to this, I had attended as a member, but ID turned 21 the December prior, so I had to shift roles. One of the members of the Chapter 1 was an advisor for was being hassled by the other members to the point he didn't find it safe to try and sleep. It was 9 a.m., and I had meetings to attend for most of the day and wouldn't be around, so I gave him a spare key to my room and told him to go get some rest. A couple hours later, I'm informed that I'm being summoned to a meeting with the state-level advisors. I get there, and they ask me if it's true I allowed a member to sleep in my room. I explained the situation, and how I was just trying to help. They said they couldn't have that happen because it could open things up to accusations. I didn't like their tone, so I flat out asked them, "Are you accusing me of something inappropriate with this member other than letting him get sleep when his roommates have been hassling him?" They tried to avoid the question. So I asked again, "It's not an essay question, yes or no, are you accusing me of something? Yes, all right then." I turned and walked out before anything else could be said, went to my room and woke the young man up, saying he couldn't stay in my room anymore. He grumbled and returned to his room. I refused to attend meetings or work security the rest of the weekend, and stopped attending meetings altogether for quite a few years afterwards. Story 46. Mom asked me if I was pregnant at the age of 12 because my stomach was very distended. Yeah, I was diagnosed with Crohn's at the age of 20, after suffering for most of my life. It's an immune disorder that affects your gut. I don't recommend Googling it. Story 47. When I was 5-6-ish, killing my babysitter's chickens by putting them in an old refrigerator in the garage, they ended up suffocating. It was actually the babysitter's nephew that did it. That household had so many abusive adults in it. Out of 5 adults there, 3 of them abused me. Story 48. Breaking into a 7-year-old girl's bedroom. I will try keep it short. I was about 15 at the time, on a family holiday with my parents and 2 younger siblings. We went out for a meal and headed back to where we were staying. Me and my 2 siblings were staying in the same room, parents upstairs. Went to bed, woke up the next day and all was a normal day. Went to the resort's restaurant for lunch the next day and I went up to the order point to be myself a drink. As I was walking over, noticed a young girl pointing at me looking horrified. Next thing I knew, this bloke was stood next to me asking how my hangover was. To which I replied, "Hangover? I'm 15 sir, I can't drink yet." The guy suddenly snaps and starts screaming at me, calling me a pervert, asking if I like little kids, shouting to his wife to call the cops, blah blah blah. The whole restaurant and pool area is silent, just staring, listening. Fortunately, with my parents being there, they stepped in immediately. The bloke then screams, "I have proof, I will go and get it." 5 minutes later he returns with a pair of size 11 trainers. I was like size 7L, which the culprit had left in a hurry. At this point my parents tell me to take off my flip-flops, show him mine. Before my dad called him and we left. First time I had heard him swear. Thought he was haha. Left the whole family pretty shaken up and ruined the day. Don't blame the dad in the slightest for being scared, angry and protective of his little girl, but at the time still felt he was a for how he handled it. TLDR, small child claimed I had broken into her room drunk whilst on holiday. Dad went nuts, it wasn't me. Story 49. I used to work the night shift at my old job and was the only person at the office between 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I was accused of pooping on the seat of a stall in the ladies' restroom. So many PPL thought it was me. I had to talk with HR. I told them to check the cameras because why in all would I even go into the women's bathroom? They wound up catching a plant worker sneaking in and leaving the elusive turd. Story 50. I still think about this all the time. My first year of college I had 2 roommates. I got back from class and they were yelling out the window as people walked by. I laughed. It was just silly and harmless. But of course it escalated a little and become more insulting, so I went and took a shower to get away from the scene. I get back with my boxers on and a towel and stupid shower flip-flops, and the room is empty. I figure they went to class or the CAF or whatever. A knock at the door, for very large compared to me anyway. Very pissed off black guys would like to come in. No, I still hadn't pieced it together. They ask if I have something to say. I say something along the lines of, and they are pissed. I say I was pretty clearly in the shower. They say Emma that hides in the shower. I ask why I wouldn't have just stayed in the shower if that was the case, but you know it wasn't really going over. I apologize on behalf of my roommates, tell the guys where I suspect they might be, and encourage them to by all means go have a word with them, but I wouldn't yell, especially that at anybody. Anyway, when my roommates got back I told them what happened and they thought it was hilarious, so you know that was awesome. I got the look from those dudes and their friends for 3 years. One of them even confronted me saying he'd be the bigger man if I just admitted it. I assured him my story was true then and true now. I've forgotten what his parting remarks were, but you know, not exactly glowing review. TLDR racism, yay. One time my friend out of nowhere said, "Remember when you said the Black Plague was caused by black people?" and would not let up and kept that I definitely said it. Story 51. I used to deliver beer for a distributor outside of Chicago. There were some really high-end restaurants I would deliver to, and one in particular accused me of something ridiculous. I made a delivery there late on a Thursday night, easy enough, take a small stack of beer into the back door, down some stairs, and into a large cooler. Manager writes me a check for the delivery, and I'm on my merry way. The next morning when I arrive at work, my boss has a very puzzled look on his face. He asks me to sit down, which usually never happened, so I knew something was wrong. He says that the restaurant I delivered to the evening before called their salesman shortly after I left, claiming that I stole 2 large blocks of very expensive French cheese valued at over $300. I laughed, and told him I thought he was joking. He wasn't, and the manager of the place was extremely upset that their beer delivery driver did this, which I didn't, and that if the cheese was not returned they would be filing a police report against me. I had to assure my boss and the salesman that in no way did I or would have been able to walk out of there with 2 giant blocks of cheese. They never ordered beer from us again, and I never found out if they found their missing cheese.